Thereafter, you follow yourself along the balcony upstairs, which deals with where people work, what they did for you. Your central section upstairs deals with the games we played as children, long before PlayStation ever came into existence. Moving across the top, you get to a space where people live, and you'll see a picture of my parents celebrating their 50th wedding anniversary in a space that is clear. We are in the District 6 Museum, which is in what was formerly a Methodist church, which is on the periphery of District 6. And this particular church served the so-called coloured people of District 6 until such time as we were kicked out. And of course, when the space became available, we asked if we could utilise it as a space of memory. This is where I actually lived. Spent 28 years of my life was spent inside this space. And then when we were being kicked out, the developer needed parking space for people's cars. And then they decided, well, we must get rid of this, get rid of these. There were 2 of these buildings that were destroyed. So 32 family homes that were destroyed so they could build garages for people's cars. That's how totally insensitive they were. That cars were more important than having homes for people. People of color were kicked out, and these garages were built for the so-called white community to put their cars in. So when I come past this on a daily basis, I can see it, but I think one sort of becomes, in a sense, almost immune to it and just think of the stupidity of mankind. It's not only, it goes across the world where people have the same ideas of thinking only of themselves and not thinking about these feelings and sentiments of other folks.
So some of you want to repeat some of those questions. Joe Schaffers used to work for the city council during that time.
Why does District 6 stand out so much in contrast to all the other places that were where people were removed?
Well, I think firstly because of the largest concentration of people being moved out, and secondly the complete flattening of homes of people. Mine was actually a rather moving out of my own when I got married than being forcibly removed, as many other people were. But the fact remains that we still had to go into what is known as the Cape Flats. Nobody that you knew, you were sort of isolated. All your friends and family is gone. And you're sitting there in a sense of almost feeling lost, because where you had come from was a strongly constructed community, and now you come to a totally broken, disjointed community with all that problems attached to it. And so it was quite an adjustment really to be able to try and get your life together. But I was looking at my neighbors, friends around me, and you find them sitting in isolation. Nobody comes to visit them. They don't really go out. So you find them for 24/7 people on top of each other. And that doesn't make good for a good household. Okay, well, maybe chat to the neighbor next door, but because you don't know them, the feeling of trust isn't as strong as it was when you're in your own community. When you're leaving your home, the feeling of loss and knowing that you're going on your own now into a rather strange environment where you have to start from scratch. If I'm going back to ancestral backgrounds, then from my father's side, they came from Barbados, And from my mother's side, they were of either German or Dutch orientation. And of course, during the apartheid years, when you were being put into various categories, it was hurtful in the sense that you were being denied many opportunities because of the various laws. So, say in the labor market, if you wanted to become a pilot or you wanted to become an engineer or just a motor mechanic or something like that, you weren't allowed to do that because that was reserved for whites. Your intake into university was extremely strenuous, and there was a limit in which you could be allowed to go into the so-called white university.
And so the map, the memory cloth, the photographs, all of that was used as part of a big legal process. So the Land Restitution Court actually met in what later became the museum.
My job here is to firstly, this space that we're in, it's a space of human rights violations. And I've tried to talk about human rights violations and how the destruction of community has resulted in what we have today in our various townships. Where people lived before, they were a solid community. Some of them have been living together for decades. I myself, living in where I stayed in District 6. I was there for 28 years in the home I stayed in. There are people who lived in areas that their families have been living for over 100 years. And suddenly, because of the financial value of the properties, the then nationalist government saw fit to move these people out and then resell those property to people of white orientation without the thinking about what destruction they were causing to the people who've been living there all their lives, and people who've been living together harmoniously, and that's people across the color borders. But due to a certain faction of the Nationalist Party, they then felt they had to take and possess everything of value, and that included, of course, land. And that is where they displaced a lot of people, took them out of the solid structures they were living in, the areas they were living in, and then threw them in as disjointed communities in new areas, which of course resulted in what we have today with our high crime rate, incidents in the various townships, which just seem to be endless. And it's going to be a long time before we can ever get past that again. It's going to take a long time for communities to build itself again. At least I would say about 30 to 40 years before people start settling down. Well, from me personally, what was taken away was freedom. Freedom, whereas before you could go wherever you wanted to, and feel quite relaxed. Suddenly there's restrictions placed on where you could go. Your movements were restricted. Your development was restricted. Although I never allowed myself to think that way. I suppose having gone to a school that was, in a sense, almost very right-wing, and there we were taught our own self-importance. You must develop yourself despite all and that I think helped tremendously in my development through the apartheid years, because what I then did was to defy whatever was set upon me. If they didn't allow me to do that, then I'd say, okay, where is there a loophole I can do that? So I could develop myself. So, also in reading, going into libraries, learning about other countries, learning about other cultures, just reading tremendously, a lot, I was able to develop myself. Well, quite frankly, my anger dissipated long ago. And you cannot hold the present generation responsible for what had happened in the past. That's like saying every German should be hated for the Holocaust, because it is not. That was not the case. There are good people amongst all people. You are good and you are bad, and because of the good you cannot hate everybody. So I've gone long past that. And my whole thing in this museum is about reconciliation. How we can turn something around from what it has been turned into by the nationalist government, to taking it back to what it was before. where people respected each other as another person. Only way you can live. I mean, we've got one small little earth, and we've got to learn to share it. And the only way we can share it is we understand and try to appreciate each other. The city of Cape Town in 1840 was divided into 12 districts, which again in 1867 was reduced to 7 districts. And for some inexplicable reason, whether it's cardinal or destined for greater or lesser things, the 66 retained that title of city. And in that way, it's the only way we can make this country work. Because if we going from what was actually white nationalism to black nationalism, that's not going to help. We're going to be looking out together. We can make this country a successful space, because I take it from the mere fact that we went from dictatorship one day to a democracy the next day without a shot, virtually being fired in anger. Now you give me another country in the world where that sort of was accomplished through all that adversity. Now if that was a forerunner, then we should take up and just take it from that level and take it to a higher level. That 20 years down democracy virtually, people still firmly believe this is my area, that is your area, you don't belong here, I don't belong over there. What we want to do is turn the city of Cape Town back into a city of people. That's the bottom line. Because with that declaration and the removal of District 6, which was the largest concentration of people being moved out of the area, the city of Cape Town essentially became a white city, where people of color could come and work, but they weren't allowed to stay. And if we can bring the ethos back that was there before, when people were this and saw each other as another person, not another creed, color, or culture. Remember that Cape Town is a port city. Your castle down here became really a defensive barrier between the open sea and where people lived. So everybody filtered in behind the castle. So that is why we had a mixture of cultures. Dutch, English, German, French, Portuguese, from our slave experience, people from the Caribbean islands, Mozambique, Malaysia, Indonesia, Madagascar, India, the Jews that came from Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, the Unkosa speaking Khoi and Sandfolk. So there was a cultural mix. And over the years, the cultural mix obviously evolved into a religious mix. So we had Anglicans, Catholics, Hindus, Muslims, Jews, Amy, Methodists, Moravians, you have the story, you name the whole lot, we had more. But they were here, and people lived.
The cosmopolitan rap.
That is basically what it was. And this is what it's got to be brought back to. That people can have that freedom to be around it. That is what we want. In a sense, I try to become the people that goes into the pool. That when I drop in the center, the ripples I send them will reach to the end of the pool. And it's, I believe strongly on the each one, teach one principle. So people hear what I've got to say, hopefully out of the whole lot that there is, that a couple of them will sort of let me say, yeah, okay, let's see what Joe has said, let's see if we can take this further. And I say we can do that, and as the pool goes on, it just reports and takes it further and further. That's the way I felt I could make my contribution to mankind. That is the main thing. And I see here, in this country, I think it's a matter of, we've shown what reconciliation has done, and it's been working. This has got a 10 rand type of tool for all country. Thank you, man. Enjoy the rest of your stay in our country. And since you know always true, how can it be the same? And don't you your heart will each time you leave.